She said that time was never still, that even silence moved. In the dim blue light of her small laboratory, she waited for the hum of the machines to steady. Every pulse, every flicker of light felt like a heartbeat she could almost control. For years she had chased a question no one else dared to ask. What if a moment could be held perfectly without ever slipping away? The woman had no audience, no grants, no acclaim, just notebooks filled with lines and circles that only she could understand. The world outside rushed forward us, new wars, new headlines, endless progress. But inside these four walls, she was learning how to stop it all. Each experiment began the same way, a droplet of water suspended in glass, a slow vibration running through a circuit, her reflection trembling across a monitor. She would whisper to herself, "Slow down," and somehow the room obeyed. The air thickened. The sound of her breathing became the only rhythm left. The droplet froze mid-fall, light bending through it like through a prism of pure memory. And in that fragile silence, she felt what no clock could measure, the space between seconds. But the discovery came with a cost. Every test left her weaker, as if the energy she borrowed from the world refused to return. She began to see things others couldn't, dust suspended in the air like constellations, echoes of voices that hadn't yet spoken. Her colleagues called it obsession. She called it truth. She documented everything. Thousands of pages, photographs, coded recordings. She wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing permanence. She wanted to give humanity a way to hold on to what mattered most. Outside, winter swallowed the mountains around the research station. Power flickered, supplies dwindled. Yet she stayed, working through the nights, chasing perfection 1 microsecond at a time. Then came the breakthrough. A pulse, faint but distinct, that halted the movement of a single atom for an infinite instant. She felt it resonate through her bone. The impossible had answered back. For a breathless moment, she stood in a world where nothing moved but her thoughts. When time returned, she wept. Not from fear, but from awe. She realized she had touched something that didn't belong to anyone. Not science, not faith, not even herself. Something eternal. Word spread quietly. A leaked file, a rumor among physicists, whispers of the woman who stopped time. Governments denied her existence. Corporations searched for her notes, and still she remained hidden. In her journal, she wrote, "The more I freeze the world, the faster I disappear." Days blurred. She began recording messages to no one. Her voice calm, but trembling. She spoke about memory, about how people fade faster than seconds do. She wondered if stopping time could also stop loss, or if it only made it last forever. At night, she would step outside into the snow and watch the stars refuse to move. For a moment, she would close her eyes and the wind would stop mid-gust. Snow suspended in mid-air, the world holding its breath with her. She felt both godlike and unbearably small. Then she noticed something new. The longer she stayed in those frozen moments, the less she remembered when time resumed. Little things vanished first. A smell, a word, a friend's face. The power that preserved the world was erasing her from it. She kept going, not because she wanted control, but because she couldn't stop. Curiosity had become devotion. Devotion had become dependence. Each time she froze the world, she tried to leave behind something. A note, a photograph, a reflection. Proof that she had been real. And one day, she didn't restart the clock. When rescuers finally reached the station, they found everything intact. Coffee still steaming, snowflakes hanging in air like glittering glass. Only she was gone. But on the monitors, her final message blinked endlessly. Time is not a line, it's a choice. The authorities sealed the site. Every file, every circuit, every trace of her research was labeled classified and locked away beneath the code of silence. But silence, like time, doesn't last. Something leaked. A single encrypted drive found in the pocket of a forgotten code, shipped across the border. Inside it, fragments of her life, distorted recordings, blurred photographs, and diagrams that seemed to fold space into itself. No one could decode it. Physicists called it nonsense. Linguists said it wasn't a language. But when the footage was played frame by frame, something strange happened. The shadows didn't move. Every few frames, the world froze for a fraction of a second, as if her experiments had imprinted themselves into the film. Time itself was embedded in the recording, refusing to flow properly. The woman's voice could be heard faintly whispering, "I didn't stop time. I found where it hides." Investigators traced her path across the world. Empty labs, locked rooms, untouched meals. People who met her described the same feeling, like that she could look through you, like she was already standing in your next moment. One student recalled that when she blinked, the clock hands flickered, and yet the story faded. She became a rumor, a myth passed through online forums and scientific conferences. Some said she'd been recruited by a government experiment. Others swore she was trapped in a moment that never ended, suspended between seconds. Then, years later, something impossible happened. A satellite orbiting the Arctic detected a pulse, an electromagnetic wave that bent local time signatures for exactly 3 seconds. Clocks nearby desynchronized. Digital cameras recorded static. The signal originated from coordinates near her old research station. A small team was sent to investigate. They found the station half buried in snow, untouched for years. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Instruments still humming softly, coffee still warm, frost hanging in the air like a photograph that refused to fade. But the strangest thing was her shadow. On the lab wall, lit by the faint glow of the machines, there was the silhouette, sharp, unmoving, perfect. Yet there was no body to cast it. They tried to measure it. The light refused to behave. When they turned off every source of illumination, the shadow remained, faintly visible in the dark, as if time itself remembered her. The recordings recovered from that day were never released, but a few seconds of leaked footage appeared online months later. It showed a single image, a woman's reflection staring back from inside a frozen droplet of water. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Experts called it digital corruption. Others called it proof. Some believe she succeeded at her, that she found a way to step outside the current of time, that she's still there, moving between seconds, living in the space the rest of us can't see. Others say she became part of her creation, that every time we pause when the world feels still, that's her, watching, waiting, holding it all together. And maybe that's why her story never ends, because every person who hears it starts noticing the same thing. The flicker in a hallway light, the moment your reflection blinks a fraction too late, the breath of air that pauses just before a storm. They call it coincidence. She would have called it evidence. If she were alive today, what would she say about us? A world that can't slow down, that fears stillness more than death. She once wrote, "Speed is a symptom of forgetting." Maybe that's what she was trying to cure. Not time itself, but the sickness of constant motion. What if she wasn't trying to stop time at all, but to save it? Because time, to her, wasn't an enemy. It was a story. And every story deserves to be remembered. The last line in her notes said simply, "When time stops, listen." The recordings that survived were unstable. Some played backward, others repeated endlessly, fragments looping until voices bled into static. But in between the noise, a pattern emerged, a pulse that lined up perfectly with the human heartbeat. It was as if she had encoded herself inside the rhythm of time itself. Scientists tried to isolate the signal, to break it apart and analyze it. Each time they failed. The moment they tried to measure it, the data corrupted. One researcher swore he heard his own voice whispering from the speakers, saying words he hadn't spoken yet. After that, the project was quietly shut down. But one scientist, a young woman named Elena, couldn't let it go. She spent years trying to reconstruct the sequence, frame by frame, note by note. She claimed that every time she got close to decoding it, her instruments would freeze. The screen still glowing, but the numbers refusing to change. One night, she recorded something new, a sound, faint, distant, but undeniably human. It was breathing, slow, steady, rhythmic. Then a whisper, "You shouldn't have found me." The recording ended there. Elena disappeared 2 days later. Authorities ruled it an accident, a fall during a snowstorm. But the last frame of security footage from her lab shows something strange. Her reflection turning its head a split second before she did. For months afterward, people across the region reported odd phenomena. Streetlights flickered in sync across entire towns. Clocks lost minutes and then gained them back. Radios caught whispers between frequencies. It was as though time itself had begun to stutter. Some called it a haunting, others an echo, but the truth might have been simpler. Maybe time was remembering her. In one recovered file, an unmarked folder contained a single message: "If you slow the world down enough, everything becomes infinite." Those who studied her work began to question what she really discovered. Maybe she hadn't stopped time at all. Maybe she had found a way to step between its frames, to exist in the invisible gap that separates one moment from the next. If that were true, then she wasn't gone. She was still there, just out of reach, living in the pauses between our heartbeats, the milliseconds between our thoughts. Her story became legend, inspiring hidden communities of researchers and artists, people obsessed with stillness, preservation, memory. They called themselves the Interval. They believed that by studying her notes, they could find her again. In secret labs and digital archives, they replicated her experiments. Some vanished. Others claimed to glimpse her in flashes of frozen light, a figure standing motionless as the world blurred around her. A few even said she spoke to them, that she told them to stop trying to reach her, that she wasn't trapped, that she was choosing to stay. They said her voice sounded calm, almost peaceful. For years, nothing more was heard. But every so often, someone reports a phenomenon too precise to ignore. A watch that stops exactly at 3:15 and won't restart until sunrise. A camera that captures a person who isn't there. A storm that hangs unmoving in the sky for exactly 5 seconds. Those who see these things always describe the same feeling, like time was holding its breath. And if you listen closely in those moments, really listen, they say you can hear her voice, not speaking, not warning, just remembering, because maybe she didn't vanish. Maybe she became the pause itself, the stillness between everything that ever was and everything that will be. Years passed. The story of the woman who stopped time drifted from classified files into whispers on the internet, a myth shared by insomniacs, theorists and dreamers. People said that if you played her last transmission backward, you could hear her heartbeat inside the static. Others said that she was still recording, somewhere beyond the reach of clocks. But the most haunting theory came from a man named Rafik, a physicist who lost his daughter in an accident. He believed the woman's discovery wasn't about science, it was about grief. He said she wasn't trying to control time, she was trying to hold on to something she loved. He spent years searching through every scrap of her work, convinced that if he could replicate her experiment, he could freeze his daughter's last moment, keep her laugh, her breath, her smile forever suspended. When he finally activated the device, the world around him fell silent. The candle beside his desk froze mid-flicker. Dust hung in the air like golden stars, and for one heartbeat he saw her, the woman who stopped time, standing across the room watching him. She didn't speak. She just raised her hand, as if to warn him. Then, everything went black. When Rafik awoke, hours had passed, but his instruments showed no change. The time codes were identical. He had been outside the flow of time just as she was, but the data was corrupted, the recordings incomplete. On the last frame of his camera, her shadow was still visible, standing perfectly still. After that, he never tried again. He said she wasn't gone, but waiting for the world to slow down enough to notice her. And slowly, more people began to. A filmmaker in Tokyo captured a shot of a woman in a crowded train station, frozen mid-step while everyone else blurred past her. A scientist in Norway recorded a single raindrop hovering motionless in the air. A security guard in Buenos Aires found an entire street frozen for 5 seconds. Cars, people, birds, and then everything resumed as if nothing had happened. Governments denied it. Experts called it visual illusion, atmospheric distortion, viral manipulation, but those who saw it in person said something else. That it felt peaceful, like the world was taking a breath. Every culture gave it a name. The still hour, the frozen moment, the grace. But those who knew the story called it something else. They called it her. They believed the woman had found a way to spread her discovery, not as a weapon or a miracle, but as a mercy, a way to remind humanity what it felt like to stop, to exist between seconds. Some say the stillness spreads during times of chaos, wars, disasters, heartbreak, that she appears only when the world moves too fast to feel, that she pauses time not to control it, but to heal it, because maybe the woman who stopped time didn't want to own eternity. Maybe she wanted to share it. And yet, there's still a question left unanswered. If she could stop time, why didn't she come back? Maybe she can't. Or maybe she realized something terrifying at that point, that once you've seen the world frozen, once you've witnessed what lies between seconds, the idea of returning to ordinary time feels unbearable. Imagine standing in a world where nothing changes, where no one grows old, where every falling leaf is forever suspended mid-air. It sounds beautiful, but it's also lonely. For her, perhaps time became a painting she could never step out of. Closely enough, you can still see her. In the pause between lightning and thunder, in the stillness before dawn, in the second your heart skips when you remember someone you've lost. She's there. Not as a ghost, not as a god, but as a reminder that every moment, no matter how fleeting, deserves to be seen. The world began to notice her more often. News anchors whispered about frozen seconds before their broadcasts abruptly glitched. Pilots reported moments of total stillness above the clouds. In one city, every clock stopped for exactly 12 seconds, long enough for everyone to feel it. At first, panic spread. People feared an invasion, a weapon, an experiment gone wrong. But then something strange happened. Those who experienced the stillness spoke of it not with fear, but with awe. They said they could feel the quiet, like standing inside a memory or holding the breath of the universe in their hands. In the middle of the chaos, a young girl named Amara watched her mother stop mid-step while crossing a busy street. Everything froze. The lights, the rain, the sound. She was the only one who could move. She walked around her mother, looked at her face, the curve of her smile, the tears in her eyes. Then the world started again. The car brakes screeched. The rain fell. Her mother turned, unaware anything had happened. Amara never forgot that feeling, that second between seconds where she understood that time was not an enemy. It was a gift. As she grew up, Amara devoted her life to studying the physics of perception. She discovered that during moments of deep emotion, the human brain processes time differently, slowing, stretching, bending it. She believed that the woman who stopped time had somehow tapped into that emotional threshold and amplified it beyond human limits. Her theory became a movement, the Temporal Mind Project. Instead of trying to build machines, they explored consciousness itself. They asked, what if time isn't something we measure, but something we feel? Meanwhile, in the hidden corners of the internet, footage kept appearing. Grainy clips of the same woman, seen decades apart, always unchanged. Her hair floating slightly as if underwater. Her expression calm. Her eyes knowing. And across the world, the same question kept resurfacing. Was she trying to tell us something? Then came the day everything stopped. No warning, no sound. The entire planet paused. The pages fluttering even though there was no wind. A single word appeared across the paper in her handwriting. Now, he understood. He took one slow breath, the kind that carries a lifetime, and smiled. The world resumed. The waves fell. She was gone. But the air felt different, lighter, as if time itself had exhaled. After that day, the phenomenon stopped entirely. No more freezes, no anomalies, only memory. Yet something fundamental had changed in people. They began to measure life differently, not in hours or years, but in pauses. The pause before saying goodbye. The silence after laughter, the quiet space between heartbeats. Historians later called it the stillness movement. Philosophers wrote books. Artists captured frozen moments in glass and light. Scientists searched for the residual energy of temporal dilation events. None of them found her, but maybe they weren't supposed to, because perhaps she was never one person. Perhaps she was an idea, the part of humanity that refuses to let time run unchecked. The quiet voice reminding us that every second is sacred. There's a story that when you slow your heartbeat enough, you can hear another rhythm beneath it. Not your own, but the pulse of the world. They say if you listen closely in the middle of the night when everything is still, you can hear that rhythm align. And for a fraction of a second, the universe pauses again. That is where she lives now, in the seconds we almost forget to notice. The scientist who vanished, the myth who became a mirror, the woman who stopped time. And maybe she didn't stop it at all. Maybe she just reminded us to feel it. Because the truth is, time was never the enemy, it was the witness. And in the end, that's all any of us can hope for. To be seen, to be remembered, to leave behind one breath that lingers just a little longer than the rest. The screen fades to black. Only the faint hum remains, the sound of the universe exhaling, as if relieved that finally someone had stopped long enough to listen.